I remember when I was planning the rally, I visited a group of folks up in northeastern New Jersey who were a anti-illegal immigration group. I really forget the name, and I can send the name to you in an email once I look at my files. But I met with the group, and they had some other groups that met there, and nice group of people. But I had said that at my rally, one of the things I want to say is that we are here not only to protest illegal immigration, but also to protest racism. Because I really wanted to try it at that time to be as balanced and as logical and thoughtful as possible. Sort of like, and as it turns out, I was trying to do what Greg Latique did, try to send them away in love, or send them back with love. Such an absurd notion. And so I met with these people, and once I said I want to protest against racism, they were up in arms, because they wanted to make sure that the word racism was never mentioned, because they said the biggest problem we have is fighting against the notion that we are racist. And so there was that disagreement. And so, you know, I mean, this was, of course, my rally. I was going to make the decision. And what ended up happening was many of them said they would not come to the rally if I had mentioned anti-racism as one of my themes. It was very peculiar, and you know, I caved in. I took that theme out of my rally. So yeah, you do meet those people who are, you know, within at least the same camp, who do you know, hold notions of, you know, this is not necessarily about race, and yet there are those who do have racist sentiments who want to make sure that race isn't mentioned at all, because that is the that's what's the word I'm trying to that's the uncovering right there. You mention it, and that's the biggest thing they have to fight against. So it's an issue of exposure at the end of it all, and they don't want that. After a time, you know, it just like in my case, you know, again, I would see a Hispanic person, I would think illegal immigrant, and I would like, oh, I don't like you. You're Hispanic. You're illegal, and it just gets wrapped up that way.
And when you went to the meeting to say you wanted to try to distance the movement from racism, were you already in that mode of seeing a Hispanic person and thinking they must be undocumented?
Yeah. But I didn't really recognize that until, in many ways, the day of the rally, because it's unconscious so much of the time. And because, I mean, what we try to do, or what we tried to do when I was on the you know, side of anti-illegal immigration, everything's about, let's gather so many statistics and so much documentary evidence to prove our point. And you get so wrapped up in it, you get so knee-deep in all of the numbers and statistics and commentary, and listening to all the talking heads, and getting involved in making your own comments on blogs and having dialogues back and forth, that it creates this conundrum. It really, what's the word? You get so drunk by it. You get so drunk by it all that the very nature of it gets you when you don't see it. And the very nature of it is just basic old-fashioned intolerance. In this case, it just happened to be intolerance toward Hispanics. And you know, it could have been any group, by the way. If 80% of the immigrants, of illegal immigrants, were, let's say, from Hungary, we'd have hated Hungarians. You know, it was just, you know, that's the way it was. So it's a very complex machine, and it's a very complex and seductive way, you know, that it works. But it can grab you. It can grab you. I mean, we've all caught ourselves doing stupid things and looking back and wonder, why in the world did I do that? You know, nobody walks on water, but, you know, it's that's how it happened, you know. And some people, mind you, are in it because they are solely against Hispanics. Some people are in it because they really hate Hispanics. Others are in it because they have, like I did, you know, the notion of rule of law, but, you know, it turns into racism. Because let me tell you about the rule of law thing. If people were genuinely interested in rule of law, genuinely interested in remedying violations of rule of law, the immigration issue would not hardly be on top of the list, because there are violations of rule of law. For example, let's take child abuse. You talk about an inhuman activity the violation of children. You can't tell me that's not a violation of the rule of law. That's a very violation of morality itself. So why don't people, spend 10 times the energy on that as opposed to the energy they spend on the immigration issue? I consider myself a person of conscience. And when you're in that situation, you think you're doing the right thing, there is a conflict. And within me, there was that conflict. So what I wanted to do, and I recognize, and here's the interesting thing. Even back then while planning my rally, if I felt the need to come out against racism, I must have back then already recognized that racism was an issue with the anti-illegal immigrant lobby. So, I mean, even perhaps unconsciously back then I recognized it, and only later on consciously did. But I think it's what happens is when you raise that to their consideration, perhaps they realize, yes, this is what it's all about, but I do not want to face it, because that kind of truth is very, very hard to take if your identity is so tied up in an issue. There's again that psychological complexity of it all, but maybe it's more morally complex. The issue is not about immigration, it's about intolerance, and at the bottom of it all, it's about fear. It's about fear. And what people need to do is get rid of that. Break down barriers, understand that there are greater issues that apply to violations of rule of law. And what people need to do really is change in here. One heart at a time, they've got to change. They've got to be humble. They've got to humble themselves, get a little bit of humility, just a little bit, and begin to transform themselves. And then you take that transformation and you bring that to others. I began to associate with some people who were very active in social justice, and was able to actually meet some of the people some of the Hispanic people in Reading who lived in poverty, and sort of learned some of their stories about why they came here. I finally got to see the human face of the issue that I had been against. I had finally seen the face of the quote-unquote enemy I had been disparaging, and realized these are human beings with very genuine issues. And looking back on it, I had to chastise myself and realize, how could I make such statements about these people when I knew nothing about their stories, I knew nothing about their lives. I had politically objectified them for the spotlight. They were a convenient pedestal for me to stand upon for my own ego. And that's what it was really about. And so coming to that realization started me on the path of where I finally ended up today. And that realization is this isn't about politics. This isn't about even about immigration. It's about our common humanity and what I am committed to, not just as a secondary activity in my life, but as my goal, my life's purpose, is to advance that common humanity and create what I like to call oneness. And that's why I came here to Prince William County with some folks who were dealing with some very, very difficult issues here.